Representative Wyble, thank you for joining us today. We've been looking forward to talking with you about some of the work you've accomplished this year in Baton Rouge. So you authored probably the most significant piece of workforce development related legislation this year with Act 313. For those who might not be familiar with it, can you tell us a bit more about what problem this bill is trying to solve and how this will impact Louisiana's workforce development systems?
Sure. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to tell these stories because it's so important to the new, stronger, better Louisiana we're building. Essentially, currently, Louisiana has 15 independent regional workforce development boards, all doing various levels of work. What this allowed us is we became the first state in the nation to receive a federal waiver where we could combine those 15 boards in terms of their effort and their work and really better leverage the federal resources we're receiving so that we know that more of those dollars are actually going to training and upskilling for Louisiana citizens. And we can do so more, not only more coordinated, but more strategically because we can create a statewide vision while addressing the regional needs.
Throughout the process and amendments to this legislation, how did the collaboration look like between the local regional boards and addressing those needs in tandem with the statewide approach?
The collaborative piece to me was very important. I served on a local school board before I came to the legislature. I understand the importance of local buy-in, community buy-in. And so from the beginning, we had to have transparency in that collaboration. And it really was a great process to see unfold because we came into the process from different perspectives and places, but we ended in a really good place and working with the locals. In fact, one of the amendments, as you referred to, it's a process, right? With legislation, what you begin with is seldom what you end with. But I think one of the critical amendments that I added personally to the legislation was creating a transition advisory team. And that 18-month team working over 18 months, but various stakeholders, it ensured to me that we would have that local voice at the table as we transition, because this is a huge transition for Louisiana. And remember, we're the first and only right now state in the nation to really take this innovative approach on. So I really have to also thank Secretary Susan Showen. This resulted from a series of meetings and discussions she and I had. She understands my background, in my commitment in education, my commitment in lifting people out of poverty. And we all know that this is our path forward, is to upskill and lift up our citizens and give them meaningful, gainful employment opportunities.
On the note from the employer perspective, how do you see employers being able to be more engaged in shaping workforce training under this new structure?
I think a lot of that is actually going to go back to the way Secretary Showen and her team have restructured Louisiana Works overall. They're much more business forward facing. They're much more business friendly. And I think this is just another piece of that model for that department to really recognize that it shouldn't be the department driving workforce needs for the state. Rather, it should be the business and industry partners, whether you're 5 employees or 500 employees or larger, you have to have that say and that input at the table. And I think that's going to be a big part of this work, and this legislation is going to be a key piece in it, because if we're not training our citizens to the needs of our businesses where the jobs are, then we're not lifting people out of poverty. We're not giving them a stronger, better path forward.
I think it's been great to see, very encouraging for people in Louisiana to see that kind of coordination and forward thinking. Another issue you've been deeply involved in is literacy. This is an area Louisiana has made very impressive progress in over the last few years, especially for early learners. Some of the most recent data coming out of LDOE showed a 17% increase in K-3 literacy rates during the last school year. And you have some real perspective as the CEO for the Center of Literacy and Learning. So, could you speak to the policy strategies that have been most impactful here in this area, and how Act 964, which you authored, will continue this progress?
When we talk about foundational elements of a better Louisiana, we talk about workforce, we talk about lifting again citizens out of poverty. But it's really we can build the house on sand or we can build it on rock where the foundation is strong. And just like early childhood, literacy is one of those foundational cornerstones for a better Louisiana. And I'm just so proud of the work we are doing at the Center for Literacy and Learning. In 2019, we worked with the legislature, the governor, and the superintendent of education then, and created Louisiana's first literacy commission. And that group laid the roadmap. We looked at the Mississippi Miracle, we looked at all of these things, and we identified key policy elements that would put Louisiana on a stronger path forward. And today we see the results. Louisiana's number one in the nation in improving literacy for our young learners. Number one. It's an incredible thing. And I think what we were able to do is we were able as a state to look at where's the science, where's the research, how do we teach children how to read? How do we understand that reading is not a natural function of the brain? And we have to educate young learners in a way that correlates with how their brain's developing the science of reading. And it's really digging down into things from phonemic awareness to understanding comprehension in terms of reading. So it was so critical. And over the years, we've addressed training all of our K-3 teachers. We've addressed university education programs at the state level with our colleges and universities. We've addressed curriculum. So we're building all of those elements. And then this latest legislation was critical in that we extend those interventions from fourth to eighth grade because we know that there are so many of our students who are falling through the gaps. And we want to be able to equip and support those educators in those grade levels to be able to capture those students. We know by the end of third grade, it's a critical juncture in a young child's life in terms of their education and their ability to read, comprehend, and understand and retell what they've read by end of third grade is going to provide them the foundation for whatever path and whatever success they're willing to embrace from that point forward.
That foundation is so crucial to long-term success across your whole life. What do you see as some challenges that we might be facing over the next few years in implementing some of this?
Certainly a lot of our school districts are really having to revisit their own structures. We have declining enrollment, which leads to declining funding, whether it's the MFP or local dollars. And then, of course, the teacher turnover overall, although that has stabilized a lot. I think Dr. Brumley and his team, who, by the way, is an incredible leader as well, and we're so blessed to have him in Louisiana. He's had a huge part in, obviously, this literacy renaissance, if you will. But being able to stabilize and ensure that every child in the classroom has a high quality, well supported teacher, I think is most important going forward. In fact, it's the second most important factor, far behind the most important factor of a child's education, and that's their home, their family.
I also wanted to ask as a follow-up how how important family engagement is in improving literacy outcomes and what strategies you might recommend to families and parents to better support that development.
I would argue that it is the most critical element for a child's success in education, literacy, foundational learning, all of it. There is no more important influence in a child's life than their family, the home. And so in fact, we at the center completed about a year ago, a 2-year pilot working with select districts around the state on improving and understanding family engagement. Because it's the one thing we can't legislate, right? I wouldn't want to legislate that. We want that to come organically from within the home. And what we emphasize is meeting families where they are, understanding that as a state, we've had generations of poor outcomes in education. We've had many parents who had poor experiences in their own educational journeys, and that's not pointing fingers at anyone. It's just the reality of where we are. So I tell my team all the time, we have to meet families where they are in that process and help them understand you don't have to be a scientist, a doctor, or astronaut, whatever. You just have to be willing to engage with your child 15 minutes a day, whether it's reading and it's retelling and it's helping them just understand that that adult child interaction and engagement is from an infant to toddler. It's how we encourage the neurons and the connectors in our brain development, to the relationship piece of it. And so reading, emphasizing reading in the home is so important. It's just a few minutes a day. We know people are busy. When I was working in my graduate degree at LSU, my major professor, and my degree had nothing to do with literacy or K-12 education, he gave me the best advice then. Find whatever it is that your child likes to read and let them read it. He used the example, his son was really into engines and mechanics and cars. He subscribed them to, magazines were a little more popular then, to Popular Mechanics. I remember when my oldest son was 7, we subscribed to Sports Illustrated for Kids, because those would come in and he would read them. Find what they enjoy, let them discover the fun in reading, and you'll see all of those other things come into play that helps them to be successful in school.
So let's maybe shift to talking about economic development, especially in rural areas. So, over the past few years, Louisiana has seen a lot of momentum as far as economic development goes, with over $100 billion in capital investment over the past 2.5 years per LED. Now, representing a rural area, you put forth a resolution this year encouraging greater coordination between state agencies to support economic development opportunities in rural parishes. So I'd like to ask you, when you think about the future of rural Louisiana, what would success look like to you? And what is your hope for how everyday individuals will be impacted?
I think a big part of the success that I envision is that rural communities, rural parishes are able to have a vision and achieve that vision that fits the quality of life and the community that they desire. In Washington Parish, we want our children to be able to have the opportunity to stay home and to raise their families in Washington Parish and many rural communities across the state. And I really applaud Secretary Bourgeois because not only has she done incredible work for us across the state, but she has really worked closely with me to really double down on how do we support rural communities in that development. And we're seeing the mega projects, right, that go up, but those 10, 15, 20, 30 job projects are equally important, particularly in rural communities. So what I wanted to do was really take a similar approach to One Door to Work that we passed over a year ago. Representative Baral, Representative Carver, I was a co-author on this, really looking at the Utah model and implementing it here. I saw this opportunity through the resolution and what will come in the future as legislation, really a one door to economic development. So whether it's an existing business that I have in Washington Parish that really wants to grow, I have a number of businesses that want to grow, goes back to workforce, or if it's a new business wanting to come in, how do we coordinate at the state level so we do everything possible for that business not only to come to rural Louisiana, but also to be successful? And the other piece that I'm hoping will come out of this is LED and Secretary Bourgeois, again, doing a great job focused on rural communities. I'm hoping to see more like training and in-service and such for our local electeds so that they understand and know what's all involved in economic development. So they understand the key pieces and steps, what we have to have locally. And then, of course, then they embrace and know just who to call at the state level to get that support. So I'm really excited about it. I talk all the time, obviously we want jobs in Washington Parish, and that's our priority number one. But we also have to look at our role regionally, and where sometimes we've kind of been conditioned to see, neighboring St. Tammany and neighboring Tangipahoa as liabilities for us. I actually see them as assets and as strengths because here we have two of the most successful parishes in Louisiana. And we provide a lot of workforce into those areas. And we also provide housing and affordability opportunities. And so we have to embrace our role within that region and bring those jobs to Washington Parish while also recognizing that we're part of a very strong region. We're not going to build an economy and a future for our parish on discount retail and fast food. We have to really go back to what I was talking about earlier, is those foundational blocks, those cornerstones, and then how do we chart a path forward that fits for not only us, but all rural communities across the state.
What do you hear directly from your constituents? What are their concerns and how are you interfacing with those?
We really try to work hard to be accessible to our constituents as part-time legislators. I've got scheduled office hours that I'll be announcing probably in the next week, this fall. We attend community events, but we hear a lot from our constituents. Not always on social media. Usually on social media, you get, a whole different tone. But the people who, in fact, just this week, I got an outpouring of messages, private messages directly to me, thanking me for the work that I've been doing for all of Washington Parish. And it was very refreshing because sometimes social media can focus and divert our attention away from solutions and onto other things. But I hear a lot about jobs and keeping our children home. And, what's the future of Washington Parish? How do we provide opportunities while preserving the quality of life in rural Louisiana that we love so much? I'm a huge advocate. My whole background is in agriculture and farming. A lot of people don't realize that, but my undergraduate degree is in agriculture. Grew up on a farm. There's land that, my family has farmed for generations. So some of the things I've done right out of the gate as a representative is protecting our farmland from foreign adversaries, co-authored legislation to protect the quality of food that we're providing for our families, and also working with the LSU Ag Center, the Southern University Ag Center, and the Ag Commissioner, Dr. Mike Strain. We're actually going to look at models to help encourage small farm productions where we can bring our farmers, we can connect rather our farmers and consumers. So we increase the quality of food that we're taking in while also providing for more agricultural production and farming opportunities. So all of that, I know that's kind of going off on a tangent, but all of that bringing together, it's really about bringing opportunities where families economically can stay in rural Louisiana, raise their family, make a good living, and have an opportunity to enjoy all that's great about our state.
Final question, as you're looking ahead to next year's session and in this time between then, what issues are you most looking forward to working on going forward?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't believe next year's year 4 of our first term. It's done. Like it's, for all intents and purposes. Next year is a fiscal only session. I supported the previous personal income tax cuts, the historic cut for Louisiana that put more money in families' pockets. Every year I've introduced a bill, I call it the Pelican Promise, 0 and 10, trying to come up with a 10-year runway, if you will, to eliminate personal income tax. Not only, I think, is it an opportunity for our hardworking families, but it's also a marketing opportunity for Louisiana. My oldest son and his wife and my 4 grandchildren live in Florida. And no matter how many times I crunch the numbers to say, hey, it's actually more expensive to live in Florida than Louisiana, it doesn't matter. Florida has 0 income tax, and they're working to reduce some other taxes. So anyway, in a fiscal session going next year, personal income tax is something that I'll tackle again. And I really want to follow up on the seeds we planted this session around rural economic development, around farming and production, and then continuing to help Louisiana and Washington Parish, my district, catch up on infrastructure needs as we continue to support from early childhood to post-secondary education, because it's all part of that continuum of helping our people go to work.
I think that's a good spot to wrap up on. But really can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak. And several members of my team at the Center for Literacy and Learning are members of Ellevate. I encouraged that from the very beginning. Julie's a dear friend. She was a great legislator and fighter for Louisiana as well. And I just think the Center and Ellevate are a fantastic partnership.
If you're interested in these types of policy talks, check us out on Ellevate Louisiana's website, where you can learn more about our events, our policy committees, advocacy efforts, and how to join. That website is ellevatela.org, ELLEVATELA.org. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.